had the privilege of applying for over 300 clients.
Obtained work experience as a university lecturer, which allowed her to get a skill assessment with 1 year of work experience.
So, when we are looking at what visa has the highest probability of being invited,
It should also be noted that submitting an expression of interest does not mean you necessarily get invited.
well, I really think moving regional is something that must be carefully considered because all states don't allow you to apply for an expression of interest in that state just because you come there, right? In order to even try to apply for the 189 visa, you need to have at least. Welcome to episode 4 of Visa Game Plan. Today we are going to discuss recent clients that have gotten permanent residency through us, particularly invited to apply for permanent residency through us, and how basically we strategize pathways for those clients and what you also can do to improve your chances of being invited for skill migration. I'm joined by Tamasha Walgama, our senior immigration lawyer at MJ Legal. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, Keith. How are you?
I'm fantastic as well. Thank you for being here with me.
Sure. So let's start with some client stories. We assist a lot of clients going to skill migration and ultimately get permanent residency in Australia. We had several university lecturers actually. Let's start with the story.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've had the privilege of applying for over 300 clients for their visa applications last year alone. So recently, we saw the 189 visa program really ramp up by the federal government, and there were two invitation rounds with about 18,000 clients being invited all over Australia. We had quite a number of invitations, and university lecturers at 90 points was a highlight of that. So, in both the August 189 round and the November 189 round, there were university lecturers invited, and they were invited around 90 points. Why don't you tell the audiences a little bit about the various skill assessments our client had before she ended up getting
Right.
invited?
So she ultimately got invited as a university lecturer, but first we did a skill assessment as an education designer, but she then obtained work experience as a university lecturer, which allowed her to get a skill assessment with 1 year of work experience.
So basically, what we did with the client was at the time she came to see us, she was working as an education designer, and we assisted the client in getting the skill assessment as an education designer. But then over time, we realized that it was going to be very hard for the client to get a skill assessment or get invited to apply for PR. So what I did was I advised her to go and seek a job opportunity as a university lecturer. She got a job opportunity, applied for a skill assessment as a university lecturer, and then in the August 189 invitation round, she was invited to apply
For
for
permanent
the 189 visa.
189 visa. So, what all of this shows is that skill migration is essentially a process, whereas skill assessment is just the start of that process. Let's touch upon how the entire process works.
Definitely. I think we can break the process down into 5 steps. So, skill assessment is step 1. But just because you have a skill assessment doesn't necessarily mean you'll be invited, right? Because the government invites applicants who have skills they want,
Point.
right? So, sometimes you have to get multiple skills assessments, or you have to change your course to ensure that you get a skill assessment that the government wants or a skill that the government wants. So step one, as you said, is get a skill assessment.
Assessment.
What's step two? I think step two would be getting at least 65 points on the points test table, right? And after that, what should clients do?
And then you go and submit your expression of interest. So, expression of interest is something that you made to the federal government, and it should also be noted that submitting an expression of interest does not mean you necessarily get invited.
Yes, I think a lot of clients have this misdirection which says that, oh, look, if I've lodged my EOI, so I should get invited. Or they think that that gives them an automatic right of a bridging visa to stay in Australia even after their
Yes.
485 expires. And that's not necessarily true. So they have to be very, very careful. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about the registration of interest process and how that works?
Yeah, so registration of interests are not required by all states. It's required only by some states where they've specified that after you make your expression of interest, you have to come and do a registration of interest as well. But that also depends on the state nomination requirements.
What type of visas do the states give out?
Right. So, with regards to skill migration, there is basically 491 and 190, which are the state nominated visas. And as I was saying earlier, the states do have their own state nomination requirements.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between the 189, 190, and 491. What do you think the differences are?
Well, basically, the 189 is a permanent visa, and 190 is also a permanent visa, but 190 and 491 are state nominated.
Right.
Which of the visas do you think have a higher tendency of getting an invite, or is there a distinction like that at all?
Well, usually, in order to even try to apply for the 189 visa, you need to have at least an occupation on the long
On
term list,
permits.
right? Because the skilled occupation lists are also broken down. So you have the long term skilled occupation list, and then you have the short
Sure.
term skilled occupation list. So if you have an occupation on the long term list, you can go for the 189. But if it's on the short term list, you can only go for the 190 and 491. So when we are looking at what visa has the highest probability of being invited, I think the 189 requires you to have a skill in an occupation that the federal government thinks is in
Is in
national shortage.
shortage.
We kind of know what they are now, right? We know it's construction trade courses. So things like carpentry, bricklaying, wall and floor tiling, painting trades workers. And then we know it's education as well. So things like early childcare teaching, secondary school teaching, university lecturers. And then it's healthcare, things like nursing,
Nursing.
right? And last, I would say social care, things like social
So
worker.
worker.
But when it comes to the 190 and 491, I think there are much more occupations that get invited because the states have different labor market demands than the federal government does, right? Why don't you tell our audiences a little bit about the 491 visa? What is it and what does it look like?
So the 491 is a temporary state nominated visa which gives you a maximum stay period of 5 years, and then of the 5 years after you've been on the 491 for 3 years you can apply for permanent residency
Correct. And in the 491 visa, you must be often living and working in a
in a
regional,
regional
right?
area.
Which is anywhere except Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, isn't it?
Ideally, yes. So we do get a lot of clients who come to us with this advice whether they should move to a regional area, whether they can remain in metropolitan areas and still get an invite. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I really think moving regionally is something that must be carefully considered because sometimes you might have a job offer, let's say in South Australia, but the skill you have is not on the South Australian list. So if you move to South Australia, you're going to be in big trouble because you're never going to be able to apply for PR there through the state nominated program because your occupation is not on the list. So when clients come to me and say, hey, can I move regionally? Can I, should I move regional? What are the benefits? I always say this is how you should start. You should first look at the state and see whether or not they have a skill list. Secondly, you have to see whether the skill assessment you have or the skill assessment you hope to get is on that list. Then you must see what is the residency requirements in that state because all states don't allow you to apply for an expression of interest in that state just because you come there, right? So they all require you to be there for a minimum period, 3 months, 6 months, even 12 months sometimes, right?
Yes.
So see what is that requirement and see whether you have enough time on your 485 visa to meet that requirement. And then lastly, you have to check what is that state government's allocation. How many visas has the federal government given them to invite applicants for the 190 and the 491? So that is kind of how I think about it.
So all of this really suggests that skilled migration should be a proper plan that's carefully executed.
That's true.
Thank you very much, Keith, for sharing all of that insights. Let's see you in the next episode.